Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Welcome, a bit of a different show today. I'm not sure what I'm in for, but Dana's on the show today and she's going to interview me, unfortunately. So let's see how it goes.
All right. Thanks, Ali. So I just wanted to say that I am very excited to be here. First of all, I really like podcasts, so this is a big excitement to get to actually be on one. And I have lots of questions for you. So here we go. So just some basic information so people know who you are as they're listening to your podcast. To start, you're Australian and you currently live in Hong Kong with your husband and child. That's right. How long have you lived in Hong Kong?
Yeah, so I've been here now for about 2.5 years this time round. I did live here about a year before that, actually about 2 years before that in Central for about almost a year. So I guess if in total, it'd be about 3.5 years in Hong Kong.
Okay. And now you're in Discovery Bay in Hong Kong. And what do you like about Discovery Bay?
Oh, look, Discovery Bay is a great place. If you ever get a chance to visit, I recommend it highly. You can have a look on my website, actually, for some awesome videos to give you an idea about what it's like. But you can run up the mountains. You can just pop over to the city in, 30 minutes. It's a great place. As you know, you've lived here for forever.
And have you lived in any other places in the world other than Hong Kong and Australia?
Yeah, so I've lived all around Australia. I sort of started off in Canberra and then Sydney, and then I moved to Japan. I hitchhiked around for a year, sort of finished school, wanted to learn Japanese and wanted to learn a different culture. So hitchhiked around there for a year, really liked it, did some random work like golf caddying and that sort of thing. That's a whole show in itself. And then moved back to Australia and lived in Brisbane, lived in Sydney. And then I ended up going back to Japan for probably in total about 6 years I've lived in Japan. So that was a really good experience.
Wow. So would you agree that your personal and professional life pretty much centers around fitness, health, and nutrition?
Yeah, I think it does. It's hard to sort of separate everything. So if you believe in health and fitness and nutrition, you can't sort of just preach it and not live it. So yeah, I guess it does by default. It's a tricky one though, because obviously it's not just me involved, it's my family as well. And so then, as you know, trying to involve your family with fitness and health, you've got to be really careful.
Mm-hmm. And food. Also it can be a tricky one.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm a big believer of never personal training your spouse.
Right.
And never telling your spouse what to do, what to eat. And also your child to a certain extent, depending on their age, but more sort of living by example.
Right. Educating them for the long run, basically.
Yeah.
Right. But obviously you have to have a supportive spouse to do as much as you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So no doubt that if you don't have a supportive partner, it's impossible to do what I do. But definitely they've got to come to their own decisions about how they live.
Right. So you have a website, ali.fitness, and that's a great resource place for people to go if they want to learn about what you do. But can you just give us a summary of the work that you're doing in fitness and health?
Yeah, so I guess it's changed over time. But at the moment, I'm running a fairly regular bootcamp here, which is mainly like kettlebell class. As you know, you come along and that's quite a fun thing for me. And I really enjoy that community base that we've created. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, I'm just so glad that I've started it and I love it. I was going to say I do it for free, but I almost do. But it's a great fun community event. And so I really love that. And I guess the other big part of my work is, if you call it work, is helping people with nutrition, which obviously is done on a one-on-one basis as well. But my biggest, I guess, way to communicate with most people is to help most people at one time is to run the 21-day transformation. Mm-hmm. And that's a 21-day course, which you can find out more about on my website. But basically just helping people realize what nutrition is all about. It's a lot more simple than they think, and getting people on the right track together, being accountable, but also being part of a community. And that online program works really well and changes people's lives.
Right. So I know that you do personal training and you also offer coaching services. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
So can people contact you through your website, ally.fitness, if they're interested in your coaching services, even if they don't live here in Hong Kong or Discovery Bay?
Yes. So with the coaching services, I guess what I prefer to do is get people involved in the 21 days first, find out whether they're a good fit for me and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I offer all sorts of different packages and options.
Okay. So you've mentioned the 21-day transformation, and I know that you're a certified primal health coach, which means that you're qualified to teach and guide people as they embrace a primal blueprint lifestyle. So can you explain what a primal lifestyle is and what you see as the benefits of primal living and eating?
Yeah, so once again, I was sort of alluding to before, it's not rocket science. It's actually really basic living. And I guess the principles come back to how we used to live, millions of years ago. But it's basically revolved around living your life in a primal way. And I guess that means moving a lot, not sitting in the one spot all day, getting up, moving. And I don't mean hard, vigorous exercise, but I mean moving throughout the whole day. Mm-hmm. Involves sleeping, getting good amounts of sleep, so more than 7 hours of sleep. Eating is a big part of primal living, and it really isn't rocket science. It's eating whole foods, eating good fats and avoiding bad fats, and we go into that in great detail in the program. So they're the basics of it, and then obviously there's exercise involved as well, and that's once again there's some primal movements. And it's all about sprints, so every once in a while, and then the rest of the time, if you are doing aerobic, really avoiding sort of chronic exercise where people are just taking their heart rate too high for too long mm-hmm. and just draining themselves, which actually causes them to eat poorly.
Right. Okay, so if people want to learn more about that and get into that themselves, they can contact you for when your next course starts. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. All the details are on the website.
Okay. So from what I can see, and I'm lucky enough that I get to train with you here in DB, but you appear to be a natural athlete and quite frankly, a master when it comes to fitness and health. You appear to excel at many things. So I know you're a cyclist, you weight train, you do yoga, you teach yoga. I know you swim, you've done adventure races, you run, you coach, you teach people about nutrition, and now you're into podcasting. So am I missing anything that you consider to be one of your passions?
Well, I can tell you now, I'm not a very good swimmer. Some would call it sinking, but if you want to call it swimming, that's good. I use that as a meditation. I do have a lot of passions, as you've listed several of them. I also like rock climbing and hiking, and I think you mentioned sort of trail running. Yeah, so anything to do with moving, and I love. I also have, I guess, a different side of me as well. I love to learn and research and read, and so I've done a fair bit of study in my time, and I love that side of it as well. And I guess that balance is always something that I'm striving for as well. Right. And then on top of that, I also just love really boring stuff, like just spending really boring time that a lot of people would call boring time, just sort of playing with like my daughter and husband, just like really sitting around a pool mm-hmm. and doing this sort of thing as well. So finding that balance is what I really enjoy the most, I think.
Right. So in terms of what the different sports you do, can you narrow it down to one favorite thing? Like, would you say that cycling is your true passion, or yoga is something that you wouldn't want to have to give up? Or for you, is it all about taking this multifaceted, balanced approach to fitness and training?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I guess someone asked me that once, and I was like, do you know what? I just want to be like really fit so that I could do any type of race.
Right.
And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, just anything. And then a week later, I got a phone call saying, will you do this adventure race with us? And it's an 8-day adventure race where you don't sleep and you just do kayaking and running and riding. And I'm like, oh, can you find someone else? And they're like, who else would be stupid enough to do that? And I guess I thought, actually, that's what I'm here for. Yeah, sure, I'll do it.
Right.
So, and by doing that, it actually made me realize that, yeah, I love just being able to do anything. And so in answer to your question, no, I don't have a particular thing. And actually, funnily enough, I'm injured at the moment from riding. So I'm actually not even sure whether I'll get back into cycling.
Wow.
And I'm even considering maybe something like BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or something a bit different.
Right.
Again, not to say that I'll rule out riding forever, but just thinking, oh, maybe it's time to try a couple of other things.
Right. So, I mean, that raises an interesting question. Do you think it's important for people to be flexible? Because obviously some people get very into one particular sport, and then a time comes when they might not be able to do it anymore. So do you think it's important to be flexible and change gears and just carry on and roll with the punches a bit?
Well, I do think people get caught up in their sport and they think it's the ultimate. And I've had lots of people say a runner is a great example of this. Mm-hmm. So I used to run a lot, and I stopped because I realized that I was just running too much. I was losing too much weight. And all the runners used to tell me that there's no other feeling you can get like running. And my answer to them is just try something else for a certain amount of time, and you might find that's actually a totally misbelief. But
right.
So I do think it's great. And not only just psychologically, but also physically, if you do the one action over and over and over again, I mean, say cycling, for example, you're sitting in that hip flexion state for such a long time, and then you go to your office and you sit in that same hip flexion. If cycling is the only thing you do, you're really not doing a good service to your body.
Right.
And you'll end up paying for it in the long term.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of cyclists now are realizing that and doing a lot of strength training as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So going back to that adventure race just for a second that you mentioned, I know that was obviously a very intense experience for you, and, very impressive for the rest of us who got to sit back here and just sort of read about your adventures. But is there something that you learned about yourself on that race that you didn't expect to learn about yourself?
Yeah, probably too many things. I ended up hating myself after that. I think the biggest thing that I learned was that I was nowhere near as strong as I thought I was. So I always sort of took this stance that, oh yeah, I can do lots of different things. I'm pretty strong, and it's amazing what sleep deprivation can do to you. And I think the guys in my team were absolutely amazing. And I keep thinking about it regularly, just thinking how strong they were mentally and physically throughout the whole time. And I realized that that's one area that I really, really need to work on. So I'm sure it did bring out some good things, but all I can think of is, I realize how maybe not so strong I really am.
I think you're probably being too hard on yourself, but okay. So I just want to take it back a little ways in time so we can learn a bit about how you got here. So can you just tell me, were you strong, fit, and athletic as a child and a teenager?
Not really. So I have two brothers, and so I was in the middle. And so it was a family where the younger brother or the older brother did something and I had to do it as well and copy and that sort of thing. So in that respect, I got into sport. I got into playing soccer when I was really young, under sixes. And so I played soccer for a long time and got in the national team and that sort of thing. So I sort of followed that for a fair while. But in terms of being naturally athletic, I don't think so. I mean, the other inspiration I had was my mum was into high-level women's cricket as well, which, don't get me wrong, I don't like cricket, but that sort of, I guess, was probably another catalyst for me following that track. But I think, was I fit? Yeah, maybe I was fit, but I definitely wasn't healthy, and I definitely wasn't your typical natural athlete. I think I had to try a lot harder to get good.
Right. So it's been a lifelong process for you to get where you are, because I think people can look at you and think, well, she must have always been super fit and always super athletic, but maybe that's not the case.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think a lot of people could just start running and be naturally a good runner. Mm-hmm. I'm actually not really that good at any one thing, and I think that's probably why I do mix it up and do lots of different things, because I'm actually not that good at any one particular sport.
Again, I think you're being hard on yourself. But
no, but that's probably why I haven't chosen a particular sport, because I sort of haven't mastered one.
Well, I think that's good because sometimes I think, as a parent or, when you're around other parents, we all have this thinking that our kids need to get into something by the time they're 3. Otherwise, it's too late and they've lost their, window to be good at a particular sport. But I think it's great to hear that, that you can keep getting into new and different things as you get older. And just because you didn't do something as a kid or you weren't a certain way as a kid doesn't mean you can't be into fitness or strong, even stronger as an adult than you were as a child.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes with not just fitness, but health and weight and that sort of thing. Not to say I was unhealthy because I grew up in a healthy family, healthy eating relatively so, but on my own accord, I think I became unhealthy in some respects. And I don't think I was a picture of health. I mean, definitely in my teens as well. I was fairly, if anything, overweight when I was younger. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you like to read and you've taken, you have a lot of, whether it's courses or education, but can you just tell us a bit about what education and training you have and what sort of sparked your passion for this area of fitness?
Yeah. So I guess being a typical A-type personality, whenever I get challenged, I like to step up to the challenge. And so at school, I wasn't really into that much of academic style. I didn't love studying and that sort of thing. I did all right, I got into university, but I was never, top of the class or anything like that. In fact, Japanese was one subject that I really wanted to learn, but my Japanese teacher told me to quit. So I did. But that always stuck with me, and that's, I think, why I went to Japan and really enjoyed it. And then I came back and I went to university and did a degree in Japanese and linguistics, and actually got top of the university for the Japanese and the linguistics and won a scholarship from the Japanese government. They paid me a wage to go over there and do an honours degree. And I remember, so I went over there, came back, and I did this Japanese contest, and this Japanese teacher was actually the judge. And she remembered me, and it was great. It was quite funny. She came up to me at the end. She goes, actually, she was Japanese, and she came up to me. She goes, actually, your Japanese is better than mine. So that was always, I guess, my motivation for doing that. But so from there, in terms of academia, when I was living in Japan, I was teaching Japanese people, lecturers, how to teach English. In Japanese, though, because their English wasn't good enough to actually teach them in English. So while I was doing that, I did a master's in teaching English as a second language. So I enjoyed studying, and now I'm into doing a master's in nutrition. So
right, and that's ongoing for you right now. You're working on that currently.
Yeah, right.
And I think you told me one time too that you've written a couple of or several books. What are the details there?
We'll have to edit this out. No, that was I did work for Oxford University Press, and I wrote a novel for them, which yes,
if we're good on Google, we can find.
You probably can actually. Yes, it's called Housemates, I think. I do get royalties from it, so I shouldn't talk it down too much.
So this podcast is a new venture for you. What do you like about the podcast specifically as a medium for sharing information, and what made you want to start a podcast about health and fitness?
Yeah, well, I've learned a lot from podcasts. It's just such a great medium for me. I can combine my exercise and even sort of quiet time with learning, and I find there's some really great podcasts out there. And then I realized that there's a lot of people who I am trying to educate through my fitness classes, through my 21-day transformation, that don't listen to these particular podcasts and actually don't really educate themselves much at all. And so I guess that was my reason to use this podcast to do that. And then hopefully this might be the first podcast they ever listen to, but then that'll inspire them to listen to other podcasts as well.
Right. I love podcasts. So I listened to, I think there was 2 episodes that came out today, so I haven't listened to those yet, but the first 3 I have. And so far it's consisted of interviews of people who are quite well known in their particular area of expertise. Can you tell us a bit about what you have planned for the podcast going forward, and also just touch on whether the interview style or format is going to be the structure for every episode, or might we hear from you directly on certain topics?
Yeah, so the idea of the podcast is all about bringing health into fitness. I find that a lot of people who I come across are either really fit but really not so healthy, and some maybe even vice versa. They're quite healthy, but they're just not into fitness. And so it's bringing both of those together. And the way I'm doing that is by interviewing experts, because unfortunately I don't really know that much, and I really want to learn as well. And so I'm talking to people that are experts in their field, and that might be someone who's a professional athlete, or it might be a doctor who specializes in a particular area. So anyone that's actually helping bringing health into fitness, I want to talk to. So that's the idea around the podcast. The first 17 episodes will come out over 8 weeks, and there'll be, as you said, 3 in the first week and then 2 every week for the following 7 weeks. And then after that, it'll be weekly. There'll be 1 podcast every week. And my idea is to not talk so much, but rather listen to the experts.
Okay. And are you open to people contacting you to make suggestions about who they'd like to hear you interview, or if someone thinks that they would be a great guest on your show? Are you open to those suggestions?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can contact me via ali.fitness, and I'd love to hear from them and love to hear who people want to hear.
Okay. So what trends do you see emerging in fitness, health, and nutrition that you're both either excited about or that cause you concern?
I think all of them. all trends sort of cause me a bit of concern because they're trends.
Right.
There seems to be this, I guess, is it human nature? I'm not really sure. But we love to know, what's the next thing? What's the thing we should be doing? As if like there's a pill that's going to come out soon that'll say, take this pill and then you're done. You're sorted. You're exactly what you want to look like. You're exactly the health that you want to be. And I think we're all waiting with bated breath about what this next thing's going to be. And there are all these trends. And I think the biggest ones are those franchises that come out.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be a particular circuit style training, or it might be whatever the next thing is that comes out, and people get into that, and then a year later you'll see all these franchises for sale.
Right.
And I guess people are just looking for trends, for quick fixes, and I don't really think that's the right approach. So any trend to me is a bit of a concern. And I think, a lot of people say, the paleo primal thing is just a trend, and it's 2 million year old trend, I guess.
Right.
I guess in answer to your question, all of the trends are a bit concerning because people are thinking that it's more complicated than it is.
Mm-hmm. But do you see sort of those trends, if you take them all in total, that there is maybe a move towards people thinking about it more, thinking about fitness? There's all these opportunities. Really, there's no excuse, to not be fit if you want to. Maybe there's just enough options where everybody should be able to find something that appeals to them.
I'd like to think that is the case. But if you look at the stats with diabetes and obesity,
mm-hmm.
it's actually the total opposite. So it's actually getting worse.
Right. Okay.
So I think these trends, unfortunately, aren't really helping.
Right. So am I right then in saying that you would like to see people not get caught up in trends, but really just adopt a long-term sustainable lifestyle that, whether that be about eating or fitness, just not sort of, go for the long, it's a marathon, not a sprint type approach? Is that
absolutely
fair?
I think that's great. I do think, though, if you're competing, then you do have to have a more of a cyclical approach. But that doesn't mean you step out of that too much either way. So you might go through, I think finding the balance is the trick, but it's whether you find a balance over a longer period or whether you just find balance full stop. But either way, there is some sort of balance in there, as opposed to peaking for, say, an event or a particular detox that you might do for a particular amount of days and then just go back to really bad eating.
Right.
So absolutely, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Okay. It's longevity. It's the marathon, not the sprint.
Right. Okay. So just a warning, this next question will be a little bit more personal, but when people see you, they obviously see an incredibly fit person, right? Not flattering you, but I think it's just the truth. I can tell you that when your name comes up in conversation, the discussion is almost always about how strong you are and fit and flexible. Someone's taken your yoga class and they're marveling at how flexible and strong you are. So, one could assume that you're aware that you're off the charts compared to the average person in terms of your strength and flexibility, speed and endurance. But, asking you that question, do you know or feel like you're extreme, or does your approach to sport and fitness just feel normal or feel like what's right for you?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have thought that I'm extreme. And I guess it comes back to who you compare yourself to, right? You're never, ever going to be the best at anything because there'll always be someone better than you, I guess, if not now, at some stage. That's not to say that I'm anywhere near the best anyway, but I guess my point is I really actually don't compare myself to anyone because I just don't see any point, because my background's different to theirs. I'm a different age. They've got different goals. So I don't really compare myself to other people. It's more I compare myself, I guess, to how I've been and how I am. Right now, obviously, with an injury, I'm not very fit. And I've been in places and times where after a double hip surgery, I was out for 2 years and had no flexibility. And so even though you think I'm really flexible, well, actually, I'm really not that flexible compared to what I used to be. Same with strength. So it's funny how different people perceive you, and it's really important that you really don't care about what other people think. I actually really honestly couldn't care if people think I'm fit or not. I know I'm not really that fit compared to how I have been fit, but actually I don't care about that either. So, it's all about really how you perceive yourself, and what other people think is none of their business.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good lesson and a good message. But I do have one more question about your strength and your flexibility. If you had to narrow it down, would you say that training or nutrition or genetics or all of the above are sort of the key for you in terms of becoming strong and flexible?
Training, nutrition, or genetics?
Or another factor?
Yeah, none of those. I would say the biggest thing would be motivation.
Right.
I think anyone, and I don't just say this. In fact, I've spoke to surgeons who've told me that everyone is flexible. If they get you into a surgery, give you enough medicine, they can actually make your legs do the splits. So what's interesting is that everyone's actually flexible. It's just whether you'll allow yourself to go through that to perform. So I think it's motivation, because honestly, you can train as much as you like, but if you're not doing it right or effectively, then there's no point. Nutrition, I think, has a big part of it, but you can't get there just with nutrition alone. And genetics, of course. I mean, if you don't have the genetics, then you're not going to be a particular athlete. For example, you're not going to be a sprinter if you don't have the right genes. But in saying that, we can use all those things as excuses. And I don't think really that I have any of those necessarily, but maybe it's more just the motivation that you actually have. Because I've had people say to me, how do I get that fit, or how do I get that strong or that flexible? And I'm like, do you really, 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 really want to get there? Because if you do, you can. And this is maybe what it would take. And they're like, no, I'm okay. So when they find out what it might involve, you realize that maybe that's actually not what they want.
Right. Because it does take a lot of work.
Yeah, it can, especially if you don't have the genes as well. And yeah, I mean, I learned that the flexibility thing actually did take, I lost all that with my double hip operation, had to get it back from the start. So, but I knew I'd get there because I had the motivation to get there.
Right. And you have to, I'm assuming, enjoy the process somewhat.
Absolutely, yeah. So, yes, good point, yeah. So it's about motivation and it's about enjoying the process. Yeah.
Okay. So obviously training and eating well are important components to becoming or staying fit and healthy, or when you're preparing for a competition. But do you think that meditation, mindfulness, rest, and downtime are also important and often overlooked?
Absolutely. And especially by people like me. And it took me a long time to get to that place because type A personality just ignores the downtime, the recovery, and until you hit some sort of burnout and you realize that actually they're the things that make the big difference. And I think for me, there were a lot of steps along the way, and that's why I got into yoga and meditation to get that other side, which really helped for my training. But I think everyone finds it in their own way, and it's interesting because it's the recovery where you get your benefits of your training. But it takes a long time for people to realize that.
Right. Some people just can't sit still or
can't sit
have
still.
A day off.
That's right, and don't realize the benefits of recovery.
Right.
So, and absolutely meditation and finding that balance of the parasympathetic and system. So many of these type A personalities are so into movement, and don't slow down enough to realize that it's not all about moving. Right. And it's about slowing the mind and meditating. And I know a lot of our listeners are in that spot. Mm-hmm. And so I really want to help people with that as well by bringing on some experts in that field.
Okay. So we need to think of things like yoga or meditation as a key component, an equal part of our training as much as whatever it is, the long run or the sprint or whatever it is for whatever sport you're training for.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what do you say, or what would you say to people who don't think of themselves as athletic or sporty, but they want to be healthy and strong, but they feel intimidated, or they just really have no idea where to start?
I would say if they don't feel that they're athletic or strong, then they're right. So I think they need to change on how they feel, because you've heard the old saying, if you think you are, you are, and if you think you're not, you're not. Mm-hmm. And it's so true with anything like this. So it's about firstly deciding that you actually are strong and that you are athletic, and automatically there you're halfway. Right. So I think the people, why do they think that? What happened in their life to make them think they're not athletic or not strong? Because everyone is if they want to be. And so I think that's the key that you've actually just pointed out there. It's that this is what they think of themselves. So I think the big thing is they've got to change the way they think about themselves. Right. Because that's how other people will think about them as well. So starting right there, I am fit, I am strong, and this is what I'm going to do. And just changing that will change everything for them, I think.
Right. That's a good point. So just a question about competition. There is, endless opportunity around us for competition. Just here in Discovery Bay alone, we could enter a different race, I think, every weekend. There's marathons, trail races, triathlons, duathlons, cycling, Spartan, all that stuff. Even CrossFit has a competitive element. You can go to the CrossFit Games. So there's really an endless opportunity for competition. So for the average person, I'm not talking about pro athletes, but for the average person, do you think competition or testing oneself in an organized race setting is an important part of achieving a fitness goal?
It's an interesting question. I think it absolutely can be, and it can't be as well. And here's my reasoning behind that. When I first moved to Hong Kong, a lot of people said to me, "Why are you riding? What are you training for? What are you training for?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm just going for a ride." And they're like, "Oh, how was your training today?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I went for a ride." And it's all about what are you training for? And you have to have something to work for. Otherwise, why would you possibly ride? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm riding because I love it. It's fun. And that sort of mentality was a bit sort of frowned upon here. And so I noticed then that everyone had a competition that they had to go for. And so I think that particular mentality maybe isn't so great, because what happens, you see so often, is people they train really hard for this major competition that they then go in. And then a year later you see them and they haven't actually done anything since that competition. Yeah. So, and that comes back to our conversation before about longevity. So I think that type of challenge or competition is maybe not so healthy. But in saying that, I think each to their own when it comes to competition and that sort of thing. I think it can bring and teach you such a great lesson about yourself, and can be a lot of fun, and can teach you how to work in a team. And I mean, you just done the dragon boating competition. How did that make you feel?
It's the whole reason for training, I think. That's the fun part.
Right, exactly. And so everyone's got their different take on it. For me, I love the training, and the competition is like, yeah, I guess it comes down to like, well, what's the point in the competition? So if I'm winning a lot of money, or if I'm having a lot of fun, like I'm going away and I'm going to have fun with the people that I'm going with, then I think that's a great reason to go in a competition. And also, it's a good time to go, right, I really want to get better at something. So an example where I use competition, and unfortunately I got injured just before the competition, so I didn't get to do the competition, but I did get the results that I wanted. And that was, I decided I'd been writing for a while, but I wasn't actually getting that much better if I looked at the stats. And the reason why is because I wasn't pushing myself out of the comfort zone. And by signing up for a competition, I decided I was getting a coach, and then I was going to push myself out of the comfort zone. And by doing that, I actually had on paper and proved to myself that I increased my power output by a lot, and I was able to ride so much better than I could, say, a year before that. And so, and you know, I won't go into the numbers, but basically I improved a lot, and I proved to myself that by having that target, I could do it. And so for me, actually, I didn't even get to do the competition, but that competition was the catalyst for that to happen.
Right.
So I think absolutely competition can be a great thing. I think what some people tend to do, though, is do too much competition. Mm-hmm. So probably not the people that you're talking about, you were saying the average person, but some people can overdo their competition, or potentially even underdo it. Just do one race and think, okay, I'm done and I'm never going to exercise again.
Right.
Bucket list sort of competition.
Yeah.
So I think it's about what are your reasons for doing it? And if the reasons are good, and it might even be I'm just going to do it because I can have fun with some girlfriends, go away for a weekend, then I think that's good enough reason.
Right. It can help with goal setting. And
absolutely.
Right. So what's the most frustrating thing that you see with people that you train or that you know in not reaching their goals or meeting their full potential? Is there a particular mistake or set of mistakes that you repeatedly see people making that just sort of drives you crazy?
I think it sort of comes back to that image that they have of themselves that they don't want to let go of. And I see a lot of people change that for themselves over time, and that sort of makes me happy. I don't think I really get that frustrated or annoyed because I don't tend to let those people hang around for too long, because I'm not really interested in being a psychologist. So what I tend to do is just let them know that maybe they're better off training with someone else.
Right.
So I like to hang around people that inspire me and that I can help inspire, and I don't think that I can help everyone. So I let them, I think they make that decision as well. They go, oh, she's a bit tough. Or
Well, I mean, a coach can do so much, but I guess at the end of the day, we're all responsible for ourselves and need to take our own action.
Yeah, but I think you're right. There is a lot of people do make, I wouldn't say mistakes, but they're caught in a rut. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and definitely I want to help everyone, but I know that I have my limitations to that.
Right. Okay. So what's your best health and fitness advice for women, and both young women before they have children and also for women as we age?
Whew, that's a really, really tough question. So interesting, because women especially, depending on how old they are, go through different stages. And the biggest advice I could possibly give for anyone who is under the age of, say, 38 or 40 and hasn't had kids and wants to have kids, get in early. Don't over exercise and look after your health. Because I went through a fairly horrible situation where I just basically spent probably eight years doing IVF. Mm-hmm. 8 years where I didn't have enough body fat, and that was because of overtraining and potentially basically putting my body under stress where if your body goes through too much exercise, it goes, right, you're basically starving is what the message that comes across to your body. So it says, right, I'm shutting down. You're definitely not healthy enough to have a child. And so as a result of that, I had to go through fairly horrible 8 years. I mean, of PMT times 100 as a daily process.
Wow.
So if any advice I could give to anyone in that situation, I would say just, I stopped exercising for 2 years just so that I could, try and get back into balance.
Right.
So I would say to someone who's in a similar situation, what's more important to you? And you've got to make that decision now because it will become too late.
Right.
Plus, you'll save yourself a lot of dollars.
Yeah.
So that would be my advice for younger people. Start early thinking about when you want to have a family, because a lot of people think, oh, I'll just have kids when I'm 38, and then they get to 38 and they're like, oh, I can't.
Right.
For whatever reason, it may be a different situation to me.
Mm-hmm.
It might be that they're not fit enough, but there's just so many issues out there now. And then I've also had a lot of women who around the age of 45-ish have come to me and they've said, all of a sudden, I'm putting on weight. I've never put on weight before and I'm just putting on weight.
Mm-hmm.
And it's happening a lot. And so that's the other reason I'm doing the podcast, is for people like that, because there is an answer out there and you just need to find out what's happening. And it could very well be hormone-based, but how do you address it? What do you do and what are the symptoms? And that's why we're talking to these experts to help with that.
So we don't need to necessarily accept it as a fact that as we get old, we're going to gain weight every year and, slow down.
No, absolutely not. In fact, quite the opposite. I've had a lot of women who have never really been into health and exercise, and they've just started in their 40s, and they say like they've never been so fit.
Right.
So I think you can start at any time, but also you need to be aware that you are different to the other woman standing next to you who might be a different age. She might even be the same age, but you're still different. Mm-hmm. And you need to work out what your body's telling you, and definitely don't compare yourself to males.
Right. Okay. So what about weight-bearing exercises specifically for women as we get older? What role do you see those, or how important do you think that is?
Oh, I think it's absolutely vital. And a lot of women sort of shy away from weights because they don't want to put on mass. Mm-hmm. And that makes me laugh because it's really hard for women to put on mass through lifting weights, especially if they're lifting heavy. If they're lifting heavy weights, then it's very hard. But it's so important for their bone density. And so I've actually increased my bone density a lot just through lifting weights. And I think it's an absolute, probably the most important exercise that you could do as you get older.
Right. Okay. So you said that obviously it's different for women than for men. So what's your advice for men in terms of fitness?
Yeah, I think it's, when I say it's different, I guess they're going through different phases as well, but just maybe at a different time. And I think with men, it's important also that they find out what's going on with their body and that sort of thing as well. But I don't think when I said it's different for men, you shouldn't compare yourself to a man. And a recent example, a friend of mine was told by her husband that she just needs to train more and that's why she's putting on weight. Right. And I'm thinking maybe he just doesn't particularly know her situation. But men, I think exactly the same in terms of they go through different changes, different ages and have different issues and can find out what's going on. Find out from your doctor do the blood tests and you'll find out from the experts that I interview what they are. Mm-hmm. But once again, you can get fitter and stronger as you get older.
Right. So is the weight bearing, I've always heard it in relation to women, but is weight bearing exercises as important for men?
Yeah, in fact, osteoporosis is on the increase and it's surprising how prevalent it's become in men. Okay. So absolutely. And especially say someone that cycles because they think, oh, I'm doing a lot of exercise, I'm cycling. But actually, unlike running, you don't have any impact on your muscles or joints. So actually it's not really doing anything for your bone density.
Right.
So that's why it's really important that they lift heavy weights as well.
Okay. So speaking of men, you often, if not always, train and compete with and against men. I know in cycling in particular you do. And you obviously can not only keep up with the men, but you often finish ahead of them. So does it bother you that race organizers automatically put the participants into male and female categories and then rank results that way? Would you like to see an open category where women can compete directly against men? And if so, who do you think would be more intimidated by that race structure, men or women?
Good question. Yeah, I do often not so much compete with men, but definitely train with them in cycling at least. And that's purely because there aren't many women in Hong Kong that cycle. That's the real reason. If there were more women, then obviously I'd like to cycle with women. And the women that do come out, then, yeah, I do ride with them as well. But I find that the men, I guess there's just more of them, but they're also quite fun to train with because I feel like I get pushed a bit more, and I like training with people. I like being the worst as opposed to the best with whoever I'm riding or running with, because that makes you better.
Right.
And so I don't just train with men, but I train with really good cyclists, and they happen to be men here in Hong Kong at least. And the reason I train with them is because I have to get better, otherwise I can't ride with them. So it sort of forces me to get better. And yeah, sometimes I beat them up the hill, but I think you're referring to the fatter ones that when we go up the hills, they have a bit more weight to pull up.
Okay.
But in terms of competing, well, to be honest, I don't really like compete. I don't mind competing, but I don't train to compete, so it doesn't really bother me. I think all the guys that I train with really don't seem to have much ego and don't even care if a woman beats them much or not. So I don't think they would care. But I think perhaps potentially there would be some men that wouldn't want to be beaten by women. And in fact, I did notice in one race that I was in, whenever women sort of came up to the men started going a lot faster.
Right.
Because they did feel a bit intimidated. So it'd be interesting to see. But I think comparing women and men in competition can be a bit tough. I do like to see more and more team events that have men and women in them.
Right.
Because I like the dynamics. But I think on a pure competitive level, take dragon boating, for example, men are just so much stronger than women, full stop, that it's very hard for a women's team to compete with a men's team. Mm-hmm. So in a sport like that, then I think it'd be tough.
Right. Okay. So just a few questions left that will help me and all the listeners get to know you. First one of those final questions is, what do you think is the single best functional exercise? So if people can only do one thing a day, whether it be push-ups or burpees or pull-ups, is there one movement that you can say really engages the entire body and we should all be doing?
Well, I'd firstly question why they can only do one movement every day. I think that's a bit, if you can do one, surely you can do 2 or 3 or 4. So I'd probably say, well, why don't you just make it 4 and do one before breakfast, one before lunch, and so on. But if I was to choose only one exercise, I would probably choose the Turkish get-up. And you can Google that to see what it's like. And I'd probably choose my version of the Turkish get-up, which maybe I should put up on my website. It's just a little bit sort of more difficult than the normal Turkish get-up. But it engages the whole body. And, yeah, it's a full-body exercise that I think is a great one. So I'd probably choose that.
Okay. Well, we'll look for the video demonstration of that on the website soon.
But if that was too hard as well, I think I would choose like the 4 primal movements, which are pull-ups, push-ups, the plank, and then the squats, okay, and even one-legged squats.
Okay. And then throwing in some sprints.
Yep.
Okay. So what do you wish you had more of, time or money?
To be honest, probably neither. I know that's a really sort of weird question, but I think if you have more time or more money, you just waste it and you just want more time and more money anyway. So I think having limited time and money is actually good. Mm-hmm. If I had more money, I probably wouldn't do anything different to what I do now.
Right.
And if I had more time, well, same. Yeah, I think a lot of people would say they want more time and money, but I'm actually quite happy with the amount of time and money I've got.
So then you think it's important to just sort of be happy with what we have rather than trying to always get more?
Well, it's taken me a long time to come to that realization. And I also think it depends on what you're happy to be happy with.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I don't really like material things, so I don't actually need much money. I do like experiences, and so I feel like I like to have enough money for that. And of course, if you offered me money, then I'd take it. But to be honest, I'd probably use it for a charity or something like that, because I can only do so much. I don't really have that many things that I need to buy, especially now if I'm not riding much. I don't need to spend money on bikes.
Right.
So my material, I guess, desires aren't too many. And time, I think, is just such a interesting phenomenon, because people, I guess it's that whole thing between efficiency and effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, I've become to be a bit more effective rather than efficient. And so I don't generally feel like I don't have enough time now. I feel like, yeah, I've got enough, and I don't need to be productive in my time.
Okay, so that's actually going to lead me into another question I have. If you can describe what your perfect day would look like.
It's funny because whenever anyone says, what's your perfect day, you automatically take your mind to, well, I do, to like Hawaii or somewhere like that, where it's just the perfect weather on a beach. And then I go, well, hang on. If I was on a beach in the perfect weather, I wouldn't get to run my boot camp today.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wouldn't get to see that private client. I wouldn't get to take anyone cycling. And I wouldn't get to do a podcast because I probably wouldn't even have Wi-Fi. So do you know what? I know this sounds really bad, but I actually feel like I've got a pretty good life.
Right.
And maybe today is pretty perfect.
So a balanced day, bit of work, bit of family, bit of fun.
Yeah.
Play.
Yeah. And because I'm not living to earn money, I'm fortunate that I don't have to earn money to live. I'm doing the perfect day every day. Do you know? I mean, of course, pollution gets bad in Hong Kong, and the grass is always green, or I like to be somewhere else. But truly, this is pretty good. Yeah.
Well, you can't ask for more than that. Do you have a personal motto or mantra?
It's something that I'm always working towards, and that's balance. And it sounds very cliche again, but it's both a physical thing for me, balance, and it's also I guess a psychological thing. It's hard to explain, but so when I say balance, I mean it in a lot of different ways. One example would be, I'd like to be able to be as strong on my left side as I am on my right, which I'm clearly not at the moment with a broken shoulder, but I'd like to be able to feel that I have given my family as much time and energy as I have my clients, as I have myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's finding that, and I'm always working towards it, and I don't think I've ever nailed it. And if I ever know someone that has, I'm going to try and copy them.
Right.
But yeah, so I think balance would be my motto.
So does that play into sort of at the end of the day, if you're going back over your day, do you think, I had good balance today, that was a good day?
Yes, and I think that's where I've changed the way I measure my effectiveness, because I used to think, oh, did I get in all the things for me today? And I tick them off and yep, that was a good day. But now it's much bigger than that. And I think as I grow closer to my Dharma, and we'll talk about Dharma maybe in maybe I'll interview an expert in Dharma, but it's I guess it's your calling in life.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I get closer to that, I feel that balance is getting bigger and bigger and harder to achieve, because it involves a lot more people than just me.
Okay.
So
that's interesting. I do look forward to hearing more about that. So hopefully you'll do a podcast on that one.
Yeah, I'm hoping to interview the owner of a yoga retreat center who has been studying Dharma for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
So
okay. So what are a couple of your favorite podcasts? If you could narrow it down to a couple.
Yeah, I listen to a lot, and I actually have changed what I listen to quite a lot as I I was going to say grow, but other people might not see that as growing. But I guess moving more into a spiritual outlook as well as physical. So I do like podcasts like the typical like Tim Ferriss podcast where he interviews some interesting people. So I do like those. But I've actually moved a lot into other types of podcasts like Hay House, which is a real spiritual podcast interviewing sort of spiritual leaders and that sort of thing. I really like that sort of thing. But then I also listen to random like Joe Rogan podcasts where he talks about absolute crap. But he also just makes me laugh a lot, and I like him as a stand-up comedian as well. But he also talks about really interesting things like the atomic bomb or, just random things that he'll sit there on the internet and look at and comment on when the next meteor is going to hit us and things like that. And then I've also moved into other things that I thought that I would never look at or be interested in, and that is like history events like the war. And I've recently been getting into Dan Carlin's hardcore all about, I'm listening now to the atomic bomb. So, and he talks World War I, World War II. And so all really different stuff actually. But I always keep coming back to a lot of those health podcasts that I really like. I like a lot of the coaching ones as well. There's like Pacey's Performance and Coach Radio is another good one. There's so many out there. But don't go and listen to those. Listen to Ali.Fitness.
That's right. Exactly right. So one more question, and I think your regular listeners will know what this question is going to be because it's one that you've asked your guests to date. Ali, do you have a tattoo?
Funny question. Why do you ask? In fact, the reason why I asked that question is because I learn so much about people by asking them about their tattoo. And sometimes it gets really personal. But do you know what? I don't actually have a tattoo. And I actually have lots of them, but they're all scars from falling off the bike or from falling off a cliff or doing something silly. So I think I've got so many scars that I just thought, gosh, I can't there's no room left on my body to put a tattoo. So I never have, and had no real inclination to either, which is interesting.
Maybe one day. You never know. Haven't ruled it out entirely.
Well, if there's any scar space left on my body, then I'll consider it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for answering my questions. It's been very enjoyable for me.
Excellent. Thank you. For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ali.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.